This is the beginning of part 3. Further along in his tirade, Pat Condell proposes the statement that without the specific teachings of Islam, and specifically those passages outlining jihad, that a catastrophe like 9/11 could not have even existed. One hesitates to choose which part of his enlightenment to address first. The corruption by conservative Western pundits of the Quran's definition of jihad, or the false concept that terrorist tactics are the exclusive domain of the Islamic toolbox. We are so conditioned by the media and men like Condell to fear the word jihad that only a minority are left who actually know its true meaning and authority. In our mistrust of the religion, we've come to understand jihad to be some kind of mob hit or contract put out by some imam or some infidel Jew or Christian. Don't let the TV or newspapers make a fool out of you. Learn what it is so you can tell the difference between real Islam and a tiny mob calling itself Islam. Muhammad speaks of 3 forms of jihadist expression and discipline. The first is concerned with an individual's personal relationship with Allah, or, if you will, God. Your higher power, I believe they call it in Alcoholics Anonymous or a lot of those other 12-step programs. Muhammad struggled himself with this exercise, having a sense of personal dissatisfaction until the day of his death. Of the 3 faces of jihad, this first one holds the place of highest spiritual regard. I, for one, cannot remember learning of any religion or philosophy which does not hold an equivalent gauntlet for its disciples. The Catholic Registry of Saints is full of them. Second state of jihad is the written word. A couple of examples that immediately come to mind are St. Paul's letters to the Corinthians and the Confessions of St. Augustine. Writing essays to defend the principles of your morality against slanderous accusations is nothing new, and nothing we don't call the work of hero intellects in our history books. People like William Penn, Chief Joseph, Frederick Douglass, and Martin Luther King, eloquent individuals speaking truth to power, or more often, mob sensibilities. Which one of you doesn't see the universal principle of this expression, this jihad? This brings me to the third and most co-opted form of jihad, and that is the, quote, physical jihad. At this point in the discussion, a caricature of the garden variety Muslim as a foreign, dormant, fanatical cell, equally capable of murder and murder-suicide, simply awaiting instruction to engage. We all know by now these instructions are dispensed upon order of an Islamic decree or jihad. Once such a jihad is pronounced, no Allah-fearing Muslim will dare to disobey. Every Muslim in every neighborhood, in every county, in every state, in every of the country is a sleeper cell awaiting orders. The mosque in question, the one downtown, right next to the site of the World Trade Tower bombings, is designed without question to serve as some kind of evil laboratory for Operation Jihad, infidel overthrow. Mr. Condell would like to have everyone here in the States subscribe to this nonsense. And I'm speaking today to let him know that we here in America distrust all loudmouths equally and reserve the right to discredit a lunatic from Britain with the same brush we use on his enemies, you know, Pat, the ones under your bed. Because here in America, as I said, all fanatics are humiliated equally. Like the personal and written forms of the jihad, the physical remains a very strong and misunderstood flashpoint in any defense of the religion over 1.5 billion Islamists subscribe to. Once again, I want to unravel the confusion by drawing on a corresponding principle used by worshippers and patriots of every faith and nationality to defend themselves against the aggressions of a predatory force which failed to respond to the first 2 jihadist appeals. In presenting it this way, I am intentionally emphasizing the point that any claim to unleash offensive, violent strategies in the name of jihad is not prescribed by the Quran and represents a fundamental break with the teachings followed by our peaceful and patriotic Muslim countrymen. You see, a time usually comes in the history of any people or congregation where the spiritual principles of the worshiping body contradict the larger social situation to which they belong. Whether or not we're talking about specific laws or cultural practices, an inevitable line is drawn to demarcate the trusted from the suspicious. For the Jews, something of a conflict could be illustrated in the seemingly trivial desire or need to handle money on the Sabbath, or, a little more dramatic, to recognize Christ in a manner befitting the humor of the Pope du jour. For many American Christians, these struggle to incorporate a sense of selfless charity, a principle, by the way, for which the teachings of Christ define no specific extreme. The struggle to incorporate a sense of selfless charity within the parameters of a capitalist sensibility have repeatedly proven the influence of business over the ideals of the church. History is rich with monarchic rulers, fascist dictators, and totalitarian oligarchies herding the compliant masses while confounded by the strict objection of a small yet exasperating minority. The Egyptians and the Nazis both had their run-in with the Jews. The Romans fattened their lions on the Christians and the Gauls. The Aztecs were annihilated by the Spanish. The Buddhists wrestled with the communists, and, centuries earlier, European global expansion encountered Islam. In each case, a caveat was composed into the holiest texts, wherein the peaceful survival of the subservient creed was to withstand any and all enterprises bent on its annihilation, was excused to rise in its own protection to meet the enemy's offense with a reasonable and legitimate defense. The Jews had Abraham, who held every life sacred, yet acknowledged one man's eye accountable for the loss of another's. David met and slayed Goliath under the auspices of the same Jewish God. The Christians, they have their revelations, wherein a compassionate Christ lies peacefully throughout the Gospels like the arrow, sleeping in the bed of the crossbow until the day of reconciliation. Here Michelangelo, in his Day of Judgment, dispenses with our Lord's halcyon countenance, paints him with an athlete's frame, a hangman's face, and purple robe thrown violently across his shoulder, like the arrow suddenly awake and bent on swift surgical vengeance. Onward, Christian soldiers, goes the hymn, marching us to war. Tyrants, beware of your lust. The day of judgment will be your torment. It is an old saying, there are no atheists in a foxhole. That's the end of part 3. See you at part 4.